Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah. We sing the song of the redeemed. Glory and honor and dominion unto the Lamb, unto the King. Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah. We sing the song of the redeemed. Let's all together stand. At this time, we'd like to dismiss to the nursery. Come ye sinners, poor and needy, bruised and broken by the fall. Jesus ready stands to save you, full of pardoning love for all. He is able, he is able, he is willing, doubt no more. He is able, he is able, he is willing, doubt no more. Come ye weary, heavy laden, weak and wounded, sick and sore. Jesus ready stands to save you, full of pity, love, and power. He is able, he is able, he is willing, doubt no more. He is able, he is able, he is willing, doubt no more. Saints and angels join in concert, sing the praises of the Lamb, while the blissful chords in heaven sweetly echo with his name. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Here we now his love proclaim. 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 And the church said, you may be seated.
An introduction. He's no stranger to us here at Highway. His family is no stranger to us here at Highway. He is without a doubt one of the most gifted biblical scholars I have ever had the pleasure of learning from. Many times when I preach through the Old Testament and the commentaries just won't cut it, 10 minutes with Kevin Youngblood will. In fact, most of my Kings series came from Kevin, whether he knows it or not. So he's a great biblical scholar. Problem with biblical scholars is sometimes they're up here. It's not so with Kevin. The problem with biblical scholars is sometimes they sacrifice their families in order to be. It's not so with Kevin. The problem with biblical scholars is sometimes they use their scholarship to forward their own ends. Not Kevin. You see, the thing I love most about Kevin is that his biblical scholarship serves the church. He's a preacher and a churchman. He's a lover of God and his family. And we are so thankful to have him here this week to take us through, Kevin, it's NC-17, I don't care what you say, to take us through the book of Judges. Please give your undivided attention to Kevin Youngblood.
Wow. I can't wait to hear this guy that Devin just introduced. Thank you, Devin, for that very kind introduction, and thank all of you for the kind invitation to be back here with you. It's so great to be back at Highway. Well, summer means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But one thing that summer means is that there is sure to be a whole plethora of superhero movies and superhero movie sequels playing at the movie theaters. Am I right? How many of you are planning to see the Spider-Man Homecoming movie? Yeah, I thought so. There's a bunch of you. And of course, Devin has already indicated his intentions to see the Justice League when it comes out later this summer. How many of you are going to go see Justice League with Devin? All right. It's interesting, isn't it, that these superhero stories, they have a remarkable longevity, don't they? And there's an endless number of variations to these stories. We never get tired of hearing these stories again, always with a little bit of a different twist, always updated for our new situation. But boy, these movies do really well at the box office, and that is evidence enough that there's some kind of attraction, some kind of powerful appeal to these superhero stories. And I want to think about that with you for a moment. What is it about these superhero stories that draws us in? They seem to appeal to us at a really, really deep level. I think for one thing, they appeal to our need to see good triumph over evil. We want to believe that, don't we? And that one of the things that's pretty consistent in every superhero story is that good does in fact triumph over evil, right? It's not easy, it's not simple, but ultimately those stories usually deliver on that basic human need to believe that good will prevail in the end. So I think that's one thing. I think a second thing is they appeal to our desire to see courage and sacrifice in action. We need to see that, don't we? We don't see enough of it in our lives, do we? We don't see enough courage and sacrifice. We'd like to see more, and so I think that it helps us to go to movie theaters and to see courage and sacrifice on display on the screen. It reminds us that those are real values worth pursuing. And then I think thirdly, perhaps, these stories bring out a little bit of the heroism in us. At least I hope they do. I hope that as we look at these stories, as we look at these superhero movies, I hope that they draw something out of us that perhaps has been buried deep down beneath some fear. Maybe they bring out a little bit of the heroism in us. Of course, one thing you can count on is that every superhero has a theme song. Am I right? Every superhero has a theme song, and they're pretty catchy. And we tend to remember them and hum them, right, at odd moments. You know, I mean, I've been known to walk around and all of a sudden, dun 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 dun, right? I just kind of go into it, sometimes to shore up my own courage, perhaps. But every superhero has a theme song. That's critical. That's important, right? Because you got to have a soundtrack and all that. Well, what I want to do this morning is I want to introduce you to a superhero theme song that I'll bet you've never heard. Judges chapter 5 is a relatively unknown, though one of the oldest hero theme songs ever written. And I suspect that it is unlike any superhero theme song you've ever heard, because Yahweh defines heroism rather differently than we do. You see, Judges chapter 5 is what I like to call a song for unsung heroes. Because the heroes that this song celebrates are heroes you've never heard of. They are the kind of people that you would have never expected to even become heroes. And I think for that reason alone, it's a fascinating hero theme song. Because these are very unconventional heroes who became agents of Yahweh's very unconventional salvation. And if I were to try to identify a single theme for this theme song, and of course you would expect something called a theme song to have a theme, wouldn't you? If I were forced to have to select one theme for this song, it would be this. God's salvation is an unconventional salvation, accomplished through the most unconventional means, through the most unconventional people. Let me say that again for you to kind of help you remember it. If there's one theme I would pinpoint for Judges chapter 5, it would be this. Yahweh's salvation is an unconventional salvation that is accomplished by the most unconventional means and by the most unconventional people. And that theme is struck again and again and again in Judges chapter 5. And it really all begins with God's unconventional starting point. Even the starting point for this theme song is not what you'd expect. Listen to what it says in Judges chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. It says, Then Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, When locks are long in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly, bless Yahweh. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes, to Yahweh I will sing. I will make melody to Yahweh, the God of Israel. Yahweh, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled, and the heavens poured. The clouds indeed poured water. The mountains quaked before Yahweh, the one of Sinai, before Yahweh, the God of Israel. All right, now already, even no further than the first stanza of this song, we are surprised. We're surprised for a couple of reasons. First of all, you'll notice that at the beginning of this song, the kings and the dignitaries are addressed. It tells the kings and the dignitaries to listen up, because this song is about to inform them of something that they didn't already know. You see, the kings and the dignitaries learn about Yahweh's military victory by means of this song. And that's rather surprising, because you would normally expect that the first people to know about a military victory would be who? The kings and the dignitaries. But not in this hero song. In this hero song, the kings and the dignitaries are unaware. They learn about Yahweh's victory by means of this song because they had no part in it. This victory was not won by kings. This victory was not won by dignitaries. This victory was not accomplished by the usual suspects of military commanders and elites. You see, in this particular victory that is celebrated in this particular hero song, God bypassed the typical worldly power structures to deliver his people by unexpected and unlikely means. You see, God saves in a way that breaks us of our addiction to worldly power and confounds our expectations that victory will come by means of the powerful and the mighty by the world's standards. Because in this case, that's not what happened. Another thing that surprises us in this first stanza of this song is the direction from which deliverance comes. There's kind of a travelogue here at the beginning of this song. You can almost trace it on a map. When you hear about the different locations that are mentioned, you go back for a moment and it talks about how that Yahweh went out from Seir. He marched to the region of Edom. He's the God of Sinai. All of those are locations that are to the south, in fact, to the far south of Israel. Now, why is it surprising that Yahweh would come from that direction? Well, Yahweh comes from the south rather than from the Canaanite and perhaps even the Israelite expectation that deliverance comes from the north. Because you see, both Canaan and Israel typically expected deliverance to come at the hands of Baal, not from Yahweh. And Baal's home was north of Israel on Mount Zaphon. In fact, that's typically, in Canaanite mythology, the direction from which they expect rain to come, and rain was often an image of salvation because their lives depended so very much on regular rain, right? Because they were an agrarian society. They depended on their crops maturing and harvesting properly, and what did that depend on? Well, it depended on rain, didn't it? I mean, we've got some farmers here today that understand this, don't you? You've got to have that rain. So they always envisioned that rain coming from the north and coming down. It usually came from over the Mediterranean, swept in on the clouds, And it was true that the northern region would get the most, and it would kind of flow down from there. Of course, the origin of the Jordan River was in the north, and it brought its waters down from that direction. But not in this song. In this song, Yahweh comes from the south, and from the south, he brings with him a storm. From the south, he brings with him rain. Now, if you go south of Israel, what do you find, church? A desert. A desert. There's no rain there. You don't ever expect the deliverance of rain to come from the south. But hey, what's God doing in this song? He's turning all of our expectations on their head. And sure enough, Yahweh and the rain that he brings comes from the completely unexpected direction of the south. Isn't that just like us? We ask for salvation and we look for it. We're looking for it. We're looking for it over here, and then here it comes back over here. And that's why we miss it sometimes, isn't it? Because we're just sure it's going to come from over here, and then God blindsides us with salvation from over there. You know what I'm talking about? That's exactly what happened here. Well, we move on to the second stanza, and we're in for a whole nother set of surprises. If you'll begin reading with me in verse 6 of Judges 5, we learn about not only the unconventional starting point, but the unconventional agents God uses to bring this salvation. Beginning in verse 6, in the days of Shamgar, son of Anat, in the days of Jael, caravans ceased and travelers kept to the byways. The peasantry prospered in Israel. They grew fat on plunder because you arose, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. When new gods were chosen, when war was in the gates, was shield or spear to be seen among the 40,000 in Israel? All right, now let's get a clear picture of what this stanza is talking about, because it starts out in kind of an odd way. But what this stanza is really describing is it's describing the cessation of peasant activities because the roads had become unsafe. Now let's get a little bit of the background of this song, what this song is really about. Judges chapter 4 gives us the narrative version of what this song describes and celebrates. And what we learn in Judges chapter 4 is that at the time of Deborah, the only female judge, right? The only female judge out of all the judges. At the time of Deborah, a threat arises for Israel from the city of Hatzor. King Yavin of Canaan gains control over Israelite territory and terrorizes Israel by means of his power. And as a result of this, the highways and the byways become unsafe to travel, and so peasant activity comes to a virtual standstill because the roads are unsafe to travel. And so everybody is seeking to get around by means of back roads. Now what's interesting is that in this stanza of the poem, of the song, the deliverers who are mentioned are clearly foreigners. Shamgar, son of Anat, Jael the Kenite. These are not Israelite names. These are not Israelites. You see, the real heroes in this story are unexpected heroes. A Kenite woman named Jael. Do you remember how this story went down? Remember that King Yavin's commander was Sisera. And in the battle that ensued, when Deborah finally summoned Barak to gather the troops of Israel and to meet Sisera in battle, God caused all of their chariots to run into confusion. And out of panic, Sisera fled from the battle on foot. Do you remember this? And he fled to the Kenites because there was a peace agreement between them and the Kenites. And so he goes to this tent where Jael is, and he seeks safety and refuge in her house. And she welcomes him, and she gives him every reason to expect that he's going to be cared for and that he's going to be protected. And she lays him down and covers him up with a blanket. And he asks for some water, and she brings him curdled milk, right? You remember all that? And then he's like, oh, he feels safe, and he goes to sleep. Right? This is not the first time. Well, anyway, he goes to sleep. So Jael comes with a tent peg and a hammer. And you know what she does, right? Do I need to go into that? He wants to know. she drives that tent peg through his head. Kills him, right? That was unexpected. He didn't see that coming, did he? Israel didn't see that coming. Barak didn't see that coming. A completely unexpected agent of salvation, this Kenite woman named Jael. Now, Shamgar and Jael are both not only unusual in and of themselves, but they're unusual by the means by which they accomplish Yahweh's victory, daily, ordinary objects that you would not normally associate with weapons of war. Shamgar, earlier in the book of Judges, is said to have slain a whole bunch of God's enemies by means of an ox goad. Just a typical farm instrument, and he turns it into a weapon. Jael, in this case, accomplishes Yahweh's victory by means of a simple mallet and tent peg, just everyday objects that would normally be used for pitching tents for nomadic peoples. And yet God uses these means. Not what you'd expect. God rejects the worldly way of doing warfare, doesn't he? He rejects the worldly weapons of war, and he rejects the normal agents of war, and he raises up people you wouldn't expect with objects that you wouldn't expect. And by these everyday people and everyday objects, what does he do? He brings down the mighty with a thud. Can y'all do a thud for me? Thud. Now, this use of foreign names at this point in the Song of Deborah points to some problems in Israel that the song is going to address. The fact that Yahweh had to use foreigners to accomplish this salvation means, among other things, that there was a lack of homegrown leadership in Israel. There was a lack of ready and prepared volunteers who would rise to the occasion from Israel itself in order to stave off this threat. So this lack of homegrown leadership led to Yahweh having to use these unconventional and foreign characters as the means of salvation. So that's one thing that's hinted at here that will become clear even further on in the song. A second problem it points out is it seems that there was a lack of courage and a general spirit of volunteerism. If there's one thing you catch immediately from the Song of Deborah, it's how much she praises God for volunteerism in Israel. Even from the very beginning, the first thing that Deborah praises God for is for those who give themselves willingly, those who offer themselves voluntarily in order to accomplish Yahweh's purposes. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but the church is a volunteer organization. Have you figured that out, right? The church depends on what? It depends on volunteers. I mean, what you all are doing this week could not be pulled off without an army of volunteers. Amen? And one of the things that this song celebrates from the very beginning is, oh Lord, what would we do without men and women willing to step up and volunteer at the moment of need? Well, there wasn't much of that in Israel because they had to reach out and pull foreigners in as a means of bringing about this salvation. Now, this situation, though, appears to change with Deborah because you get a shift in the song at this point. Because when Deborah rises up in Israel, when Deborah takes a stand, things begin to change. And God deliberately begins stirring Israelite courage